Good afternoon, Alex Ansary speaking. It is the afternoon of October 12th, 2016. And if you're watching spaceweather.com, spaceweather.gov, or the NOAA feed on Facebook, maybe you've noticed that there's an ongoing geomagnetic storm and there's a coronal mass ejection that recently shot out from the sun. And they're expecting this activity to last several days in this video podcast. The actual first podcast to be recorded in my new video production studio. You'll be able to see that in the coming weeks as I get the installation in and things improve here. And so I want to take this moment to share with you how the solar flares impact me. I'm not reading from a script, so there are certain things that are going to come out that I haven't discussed yet. A number of different ways in which I am impacted by geomagnetic storms, which, by the way, can be caused by things other than solar flares as well. I believe cosmic rays striking the Earth's magnetic field can cause a geomagnetic storm, and perhaps other things as well. But this is a subject that I have thought about for most of my life, but especially since I got involved in the alternative media. I knew a little about it around the time of 9/11, but as I started researching things and finding out about the cycles of war and peace, which Alexander Chavinsky of Russia in 1918, almost exactly 100 years ago, an Alex in Russia was looking at this, and at that time, his conclusions, his understandings as to other factors influencing the Russian Revolution, they resulted in this man being put away for a certain amount of time. So this information is valuable, especially when we look at how the dark occult use these particular periods to start their wars, start their conflicts, and engage in mass media mind control. I have noticed a lot of people posting on Facebook about dream invasions, and I've posted as well about some of the things that I've experienced, but I'm noticing patterns in others. I'm also noticing a fair amount of people, I counted at least 4, and it was so extreme that I saved their Facebook pages for later observation and perhaps citation, because they're showing clear signs of Archon mind hijack. And what I've come to realize is that this is a subject that I'm one of the few on the earth that's actually discussing, the link between false flags, staged events, and solar flares. People have talked about numerology. People have talked about moons, eclipses. People have given a lot of predictions about a lot of things, and a lot of things actually haven't come true. But a lot of people have kind of missed the boat, if you will, on looking at the links between these staged events and other things, including earth changes, things that are natural, major earthquakes, major storms, winds, lightning, and geomagnetic storms caused by solar flares hitting the Earth's magnetic field. So this is obviously an area that I specialize in. I'm obviously here on the planet at this time to expand my research on this. And so, in this free flow form, this podcast that I'm going to be uploading today, I'm going to be tuning my attention into speaking specifically as to how I learned about these things early on in my life. And it is through the experiential experience of going through these changes and seeing in our lives when we go through certain cycles, periods where we were going through a lot of moving. And I mean, the whole course of my life, like if you were to chart it on a map, and then you overlay the solar maximum periods over that, and it's not very difficult to do this. To gather the data from science that is recognized when there were geomagnetic storms, when there were even power outages or satellites affected by it, and then look at what was going on in your life. Now, I did a podcast several months ago on my 12-year anniversary since that period of say, dabbling with heroin, for example. And so when I look back to 1999, I see also, and it's frustrating because I want others to understand it as well. So it's unique and frustrating to be one of the few on the earth that I'm aware of that's speaking about the links between, say, solar flares and heroin overdoses, and then getting even more specific to certain regions. And so I speak about Portland because it's a place that I know really well. And from living in Portland and living in other places, I have seen firsthand, yeah, I experienced it. I experienced that wave of the late 90s, early 2000s. And I noticed others as well were going through some incredibly challenging times. And then I noticed early on back then a recovery cycle around 2004, 2005. I've never seen anyone else talk about a recovery cycle, but there I was, a part of a recovery cycle as we went into solar minimum. And there was something about my brainwave state that seemed to refine itself i as we were going through a reset. So there may have been manufactured chaos, order app KO, with the manufactured 9/11 event. But spiritually speaking, yes, I think that there are things going on in the cosmos there that are to assist us, that are riding the solar wave, if you will. And each of these solar cycles, each of these solar epochs, I would say in some of us more than others, we could see great, great change because of how we're affected by it. But let's break down this into something more simplistic that you can identify with in the here and now. Okay, and so I notice different sensations during different periods, epochs, and eras, and we're at also different levels in our lives. So the sun is a booster. Whatever's already going on with you is going to be boosted. So let's say that you're already in the pattern of smoking. For those of you that identify with the experience of smoking and then quitting smoking and going back and forth, certain people that are on that smoking or drinking or something to that effect involving escapism and whatever it is. And that can include hard drugs and those things that are perceived to be completely safe. Like for a lot of people, marijuana is believed to be completely safe, although it can provide its complications if someone becomes very apathetic to the things that matter. And it does have that effect, and it is a intended effect to numb out. So if we honestly look at the situation, at emotions, we see emotions rise. We know that humans have certain tendencies to deal with some of those emotions. For those that have ways of going outside of themselves to deal with that, you could see some serious chaos. And so throughout my lives, I've noticed the drive-by shootings in Portland, more people drinking. I've talked about the drugs and other forms of escapism. So we're well, we're becoming cyborgs, but that's another subject. We are electromagnetic beings of light that are here on the planet in physical form. The sun is electromagnetic. You have other electromagnetic things that I've talked about, the cell phone towers. You're in urban areas, you're dealing with a lot of artificial electromagnetic energy. So there's like a psychic interference, intuition interference, consciousness interference, mind hijack in some cases for those that are really out of balance from things that they've used to maybe escape their feelings. It opens up a doorway. And if you have a lot of people that are like out of body and really like vulnerable to mind control and mind hijack, their emotions can be used against them. Now, why a link with false flags, things of that nature? I have noticed even in my own body a surge of physical strength and sexual desire and desire to relocate and travel and be an adventurer. Your testosterone goes up for those of us that are men. For those of you that are men that have actually researched this, and perhaps if you're a female, maybe you can also visualize and understand this. And there are some females that have put out a lot of good information about the sun because I believe it affects us both. I've seen what it does to female libido, and it's real. It's real. Those waters are gushing like Niagara Falls, if you will. Once you're going and once you're in the flow, if you know what I mean. Had my experience of one night stands, had my experience of dealing with very aggressive people. Again, sex and violence, things this culture, this material world thrives on. energy based, released. Attraction, detraction, transmitting, receiving, energy. Energy is energy. And in this world of energy harvesting centers, during certain periods, humans are harvesting more of certain kinds of energies, which boosts other forms of life that are also feeding off the energies of the sun and human emotion coming from the boosted energy from the sun. So I've noticed in my own life, specifically in Portland, more people going through the mind hijack and going Archon on me, for example. There's a reason why years ago I was talking about, it's almost as if when we go into solar maximum, it's the time to go off grid and get away from all this artificial electromagnetic energy, which is a conduit for the archonic beings. And I was seeing more sabotage in my life and more females that I was interested in having dream invasions. I'm like, whoa, this is real. And now, and I want to thank Michael on Facebook for sending me more confirmation that people are experiencing simulated Archon mind dream hijacks. I guess a term I'm coining it. Other people may be using it. Archon dream hijack, or just dream hijack for short, for those that are afraid of using the Archon term, which I don't believe is very healthy. We're spiritually strong. Cameron Day recommends, fear of using certain words. I just want to remind people that such superstitions can actually create that which you're afraid of. So keep that in mind. So I've noticed in my own life with women that there's more of a mind hijacking taking place, and especially in urban environments. But I cannot tell you that I've gone to a rural environment and I've seen less of it. I noticed that the internet is a big conduit as well for emotions going back and forth. So the internet being online and being connected with other people can be very toxic when it's highly charged emotionally during geomagnetic storms. And for me, it's additionally frustrating because you'll have like 100 people commenting on NOAA, like, whoa, what's this mean? Or maybe jokes about the power grid going down because a lot of people are just, they're tired of hearing about things that are fear based. And so they really don't know how to talk about the sun from a position other than that, or to make fun of people that are watching the sun. Like this is some sort of like, mental illness movement. But there's more to know about the geomagnetic storms and their effect on our planet and the people than just making jokes about the grid going down or signaling an alarm or becoming afraid that this is going to be it. I think we're years off from that, to be completely honest with you. But I do believe that such an event can happen in our lifetimes, and it's going to be a civilization reset. And it won't be the first time it's happened. So that's the big picture. But on the smaller picture, connected with the big picture, from the micro to the macro, as below, so above, and vice versa, we can see how this is a time where everything is boosted. Things are moving forward. We're right now at the tail end of this particular solar cycle. So it's like a climax. You can liken it to a sexual climax, which can be likened to a volcanic eruption or a release of energy. So as we move into this full moon, and I'm not an astrologer, but I'm speaking from my intuition, then I think it's more important to study our relationship to the sun and the moon, starting with the sun. And this comes before other things. Many humans have forgotten this, and they're looking more at other forces of influence that are less organic in nature, to say it simply. But of course, there are anomalies with the moon, and we are affected by the moon, be it natural or an unnatural satellite placed there by mysterious forces. It has an influence as well. But more people are aware of the moon and its cycles, and it's linked to crime. Police officers, hospital employees, others have seen the rise in activity. They've seen themselves get very busy during periods of full moons. If we can understand the changes the sun brings to the human physical body, we can mindfully redirect this to something positive. So, throughout the course of my own life, I've seen how I've been affected by these things in positive and negative ways. I've mentioned the negative in the example of the drug usage, but there was also a lot of positive things in that period during the clean spells reading many books. 2001, 2002 documentary films, up all night, just absorbing information. I went on a meditation retreat in 2002. When the solar flares, uh, activate something within our body, we may want to sit down and meditate and ground and activate to something higher. There may be an aspect of our imagination that's reaching an awareness of certain things. And if we were just to become aware of one particular thing, it's almost as if certain phrases have certain magical attributes. By becoming aware of a certain piece of information, thereby holds the key to unlock a door that was never opened before in our own mind, that leads to greater levels of information and awareness. And it's like it's a domino effect in a positive sense going upward. So we can easily spiral downward and upward when we go through these solar cycles. So I've seen myself spiral downward. I've seen myself spiral upward very, very quickly in a period of months when I decided it was time, to come out swinging with outside the box. My life changed forever, and that was 2004. Here we are 12 years later. So much moving. Oh my God. Almost like literally down the beginning of the solar cycle to the end of the solar cycle was nonstop moving for Alex Ansary. Of course, there was lots of moving in the solar minimums, but there were periods and gaps of 1 year here, there, 2 years there, 6 months there. But it wasn't like moving, 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 moving. And again, I've noticed this in my consciousness that I will think about different places or have the desire for a new experience. And so, there's also different magnetics on the planet. So that was very much a manufactured, manifested, intended, created reality when I went to Costilla County the very first time in 2012, months before December 21st. Was I there because I was afraid of the end of the world? No, I was there because I wanted to be in a very rural, you know, out of the city kind of a spot during that particular period in time, to ground, to reconnect with myself, to be off the grid for the first time, a positive manifestation ritual which I engaged in, and a survival situation. Most people don't know that I survived. I went into a yurt in the middle of the desert. It's like something out of the Bible, but I wasn't intending to be that way. 40 days and 40 nights. Well, it turned into be 9 months. 9 months with very little money and no internet, living in Costilla County, in an area where people freeze to death sometimes. So people just assumed I was crazy. And they didn't see that there was some sort of a spiritual experience that I was seeking from that. As the solar flares were having their effect on the urban environment where I was from in Portland, and more of that archonic interference was starting to build and build, I just didn't know how much until I went back in 2014. And now I realize why I went back. I had to see what had become of Portland, Oregon, as the solar cycle was still ongoing. And yes, there are positive things. There are people getting laid, and there are people having parties, and there are people creating energy and being festive. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that or that that isn't going on. On the other end of things, you see human misery magnified when certain cities become super popular. You see the misery when people become so absorbed in that energy they lose themselves, and they become uh, too intoxicated in some way, shape, or form. And not just drugs and alcohol. There's other ways people can be intoxicated, and they can be used in a way by archonic beings that they're in the game. If they're playing the game, be they male, be they female, be they young, be they old, but we see many misled also of all racial groups. Humans using their beauty and their brawn and their gifts and their charisma, which comes from this energy, which comes from the sun, when they use that to control others, when they misuse energy. There's many ways we can use energy mindfully and misuse energy. When we misuse energy, when we hurt others, and also think about the weapons that are powered by the sun, that's a misuse of energy. So is some of the atomic weaponry, weapons that destroy whole civilizations. I also would say, as I've been pondering a number of things regarding my own soul and what I'm doing here, what I'm really doing here, We may be here because we played a role in making this matrix. It very well could be our own Frankenstein. Whether we were literally playing that role in a previous civilization that is now gone, and there's rise and fall civilizations tied in with the sun, or we're part of a fallen angel fracturing of a soul emanations. Maurice Cotterell talks about certain souls in this reality that may have splintered out because of prior actions that they did that were so wrong that affected so many. It's very possible that we're living out our own creation. But whether you believe in that or not isn't the point. The point for me is in this podcast about how I'm directly affected and how I see its effect in others, in positive and negative, to discuss the positive. Something about our DNA that's almost prophetic, that's able to see beyond the DVD, past, present, and future, the lifetimes. And we can clean up certain things possibly from other lifetimes and things that we've done in the past. I don't know about changing the past. I'm not going to go that far. But the very act of questioning, the very act of pondering certain things is a positive. It's about asking the questions. The answers will arrive at their own time. On a physical level, I notice so much more strength in myself. I notice the martial arts and bodybuilder fads are so real, but yet I've never seen a single martial artist on the earth or bodybuilder discuss this link with boosted testosterone. I mean, scientists should be doing studies on this. They have done studies on suicides and geomagnetic storms. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, Google it, 2008. They did a study on wild market decisions caused by the effect of solar flares on stock traders. I am not kidding. So there is a physiological effect on the athlete, on the adventurer, the backpacker, the human that likes to have sex with other humans. There's a psychological, physiological effect, and we can channel that energy in a mindful way or an unmindful way. There are consequences regardless of whether or not we know about all of this and whether or not we're aware of this. It's not like, being aware of this is going to cause a problem or that we're encouraging fear of the sun. I think a lot of people have been conditioned to not even think about things like this, like the sun. Why is that? I don't know. Is this something in our cellular memory where people are afraid of being burned at the cross because they went deeper down the hole of the matrix? I think it's very possible, and I think this is happening very subconsciously. In other words, people aren't aware of this programming to look away from the sun and its cycles and to look instead in the direction of other planets and hypothetical theories, and even going into flat Earth. There's almost something embedded within us that the masses are reacting to, and it's like a tape. It's like, go look here and go look there and go put your attention on this, but don't actually look at these cycles. And if someone does bring up the sun, go somewhere really off the wall with it. I'm noticing that there's a few people that are discussing the sun in consciousness, and they're getting new agey with it. They're missing the point. They're not trying to understand the cyclical nature of all things. They want to believe in a wave X happening in September 2015. This is going to cause a global enlightenment wave. And there were people that were basically using information and sharing information that I shared in my lecture, and they may not have found my lecture, but just found the initial information about the sun and the cycles. And then they twisted it to another false enlightenment rapture date where this wave X was supposed to come in. And what we did see was the largest solar flare of the year. And then, of course, for those that are long-term viewers, what did you see? You see Costilla County blow up, so to speak, not with weapons, but with all that went down. That was all following the biggest solar flare of that year. But was that a wave X, as a guy named Simon claimed? And maybe there's a reason why you don't want to do a podcast with me. So use discernment when you come across other researchers that are discussing the sun, because some of them have allowed some of the distorted New Age information to contaminate helpful information that we can learn about the sun. So, wrapping up some of my thoughts, I've noticed the sun's effect on me in terms of boosted sexuality, boosted intuition, changes in the dream state, which can bring about an archon mind hijack or dream simulation if I'm involved in unhealthy activities, such as chain smoking or anything, other things that can weaken the body's aura. So by moving my attention to more positive activities and more healthier things in my body, for example, and then drinking extra liquids and making sure that I rest and making sure that I walk more. And whether I like it or not, I'm going to be expressing more of myself, either on a podcast or through 10 friggin' Facebook posts made in a single 2 hour period, like today. And if you're not a Facebook friend, you can add me today and take a look at what I've been exploding about regarding ideas and information. But there is definitely a way that I am responding in a more imaginative, creative, spiritual way, intellectual way. It's a booster. And if we learn how to use this in a number of mindful ways, we can bring a lot of good fortune to our lives. And when I talk about wealth and riches, I'm speaking more spiritually than physically. I also want to add, with regards to testosterone and this being boosted in the male, for example, or in anyone else, there's something about the martial artist rhythm that I've seen in fight videos and periods where there were martial arts fads, to where there is something happening at a faster rate. You can even say metabolism or something hormonal or something else, but something sped up to where they are more efficient at what they are doing. And what the dark occultists have done with the, say, before 9/11, for example, which was happening literally during solar flares. Even that day the planes were hit by those planes, and we're not getting into no plane theory here in this podcast, but the planes hitting the towers, the moment those planes hit the towers, spikes on the planetary K index, the geomagnetic storm being literally active down to those minutes. So there is a conscious um, hive mind connection to the geomagnetic storm and global fear-based events. We can be impacted by this hive mind, by the collective consciousness. We can also impact this matrix as well. We can impact the hive mind. We can take that focused energy and not just do things independently in our own lives. Together, we can cause major things to take place. There's a movie called Dark City. I've referenced it briefly in my solar flare lecture, but he basically takes down their dark grid. If you think they live where Roddy Piper shoots the satellite, that's the mind control satellite, hypothetically, you can maybe think about something like this out in space, potentially existing. David Icke says it's the moon, but let's just say there's a mainframe. There's also a lot of movies where it's all about taking out the mainframe that's causing the problem. And I think spiritually, there's a mainframe that is involved in mind control and some pretty sophisticated things. In the end, if the human beings of the earth realized, if they put their intention towards taking down the mainframe that's holding this reality in place, I believe they would find themselves successful. And so, I would definitely suggest very powerful uses of what some call the law of attraction, but which is really something more specialized and bigger than what most people believe it is, and how most people are using it. We can change some major things physically and spiritually during these solar changes and solar resets. And we can have some amazing grounding breakthroughs in our own personal lives if we are on the path. If we find ourselves not on the path or only halfway on the path, I believe we can find ourselves in a world of hurt. They know how we're affected by these particular changes and they use it against us. It's time that humanity educate themselves about these natural cosmic forces and how they directly relate to us and our world. I'm Alex Ansary. This has been another Solar Flare podcast on the effects of human consciousness, specifically on how I've noticed its effect on myself in my own personal micro cycles moving forward in this physical plane. We'll talk to you next time.